I always try to make sure when people talk about politics to let them know that I was never even close to being as engaged as I am now. I grew up in a family that didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. When I went off to college, I didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. And then when I started working, didn't pay enough attention. I did start to vote, but then I would probably always do it absentee. I'd have to go into the office because I was traveling with work. And so I didn't pay attention. I just voted because I needed to. And I didn't even really pay attention so closely to what Democratic policies were. I just knew that that was the way that I was supposed to vote based on the things that I would hear in the news. But my real engagement came for so many people after Donald Trump won. I think it was because women just started to get engaged because Hillary Clinton was running, and and that was sort of why I got really involved. But then as an African American person, woman, we really started to pay attention prior to that because of Barack Obama. And I think that for many people, but especially me, it was seeing the impact of a Black person running for that kind of office that sort of got my spidey senses at least paying attention so that by the time Hillary Clinton ran, it was a different kind of engagement because now we've seen a Black president and now we were going to see a woman. So that was sort of some real deep down engagement. And then when she lost, and Donald Trump became president, it was no longer even like fun or exciting. It was just scary. It was just scary. And I just remember walking into any store and just sort of looking at people and thinking, did they vote for Trump? Who did they vote for? And so now you have this different kind of interest because the world sort of shifted the way that I thought about the world just shifted. And and then I got more interested and I just talked about it nonstop. And my husband was just really sick of hearing me talk about it. And then I was just paying close attention and watching the news every day. And especially at that time, I was retiring from work. So now I had even more time to pay attention. And I just, I just couldn't believe what was happening. And my husband would say, if you feel so passionately about it, you should do something about it. And I never thought about what I would actually do about it. I just knew that something must be done. And I sort of watched for what other people might do about it, not necessarily myself. And then I got involved in my Democratic committee, my local Democratic committee. And that was really, that was satisfying. And I was still paying attention to stuff. And then we were watching, interestingly enough, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I was watching Marjorie Taylor Greene on TV, and there was a man, a Democratic man, who was running against Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I was really happy because at that time she was really getting big, but she was mean. Uh, she was mean, and Republicans were starting to be really mean. And the guy dropped out, and he wasn't going to run against Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I remember saying to the person who was part of our Democratic committee, I called the man a really bad name, and he said, "Well, if you feel that way, we have someone running against our candidate, and nobody's running against them. So why don't you run against them?" And I was like, "Well, no." What happened, he started talking to me about running. And I talked to a bunch of people about whether or not I should do it. After a long conversation with my husband and my family, I decided that I would run for the House of Delegates against a person who'd been there forever. And I think when I first started to run, as I was thinking about it and getting more knowledgeable about it, I really felt like, okay, if I don't win, it's going to be okay because the purpose of running sometimes isn't to win, but it is to make sure that we hold people accountable. And interestingly enough, I had been on a call with the League of Women Voters, and the opponent at the time, Rob Bloxham, was on the call along with Linwood Lewis because they would come on and talk to the League of Women Voters. And I got invited to just be on as a person listening in to be able to ask a question. And it was about several different things. And I don't remember all of the issues. All I know is I disagreed with the Republican stance on what these particular issues were. And I remember sort of having a back and forth, even at that time, with Rob Bloxham, so that the League of Women Voters, the person leading the call, said, now, this isn't what this call is supposed to be. And so that gave me the idea that yeah, you can talk back to these people and you can ask questions. And even at that point, people are still uncomfortable with disagreement. So after that, whatever time after is when I decided that I would run for that seat. And I met so many people in that process. It's how I met Lindley Thorne for Rural Ground Game. It's how I met the women from Network Nova. It's how I met Local Majority. It's how I understood that community was really important. And quite frankly, I didn't make the final decision to run until after I joined a Friday power lunch call. And that's when I finally made my decision that I was going to do it because I felt like there would be people who would be supportive and who would help me and that I could lean on. And that's how I made my final decision on that call. Rachel Bittercoffer was a guest on that call. It was my very first Friday Power Lunch call. And I just was like I was around celebrities. I'd watched Rachel Bittercoffer on TV, and I just was so enamored with her. And on the call, listening to Louisa was on the call that day. And I remember when I joined the call, some people said, "Oh, we hear that you're thinking about running," and I never said whether I was or not. But that was what gave me the final boost to say, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And that's how I ended up running for the House of Delegates, and that's how I ended up having full engagement in the democratic process.